1998. Oh my, yes. Hi guys.
Oh yeah, the one.
Right away. My dad. It's like a civil war.
was taking so long.
You can see it. 17 years ago, we did these things.
Grant and Michael, thank you very, very much. Thank you, guys. This was pretty cruel to do to me, though. Come on. That was 17 years ago. It's a great privilege to represent this community, and I'm going to be talking about the issues with you. But thank you especially to the Palmetto Bay and the Pinecrest commissioners and council members that we have here. Thank you very much. Let's give it up for our local elected officials. But let me have my much better half say a few words, and then I'll yank it away from him.
Well, I know that that I was not scheduled, and I can testify that you can get along with somebody even if you don't agree with them on everything. that will work. But I deny that about Homestead and the Civil War, because under certain interpretations of what happened in that era, it would mean I wasn't born in the United States. And I want to make sure we keep that record going. You know, one thing about public service, you certainly can make mistakes. I remember back in the day that I voted against the incorporation of Pinecrest. It wasn't a big, you know, I wasn't not a burning issue, but I always vote, and therefore I have to vote either right or wrong. And my brother was concerned. He had experience with some of the cities in North Dade County in trying to get building inspectors out and so forth, and the small municipalities had been a problem for him. And he said Miami-Dade was slow, but at least you got them. After Pinecrest was incorporated for a couple of years, he said, you know, I was wrong, referring to himself. He's now deceased, because now you can get an inspector, you can get a building inspection, you know, quickly in Pinecrest. And before, you would wait, and you'd have the concrete trucks there, if you know anything about construction, and a real problem. So he became an advocate of the incorporation of municipalities in South Dade, always with the asterisk that it had to be, you know, by the right people. It had to have the right public officials. But the smaller municipalities, and they're not that small, Pinecrest or Palmetto Bay, for example, is in the top 100, and Pinecrest is close to the top 100 of the state of Florida, and larger than certain entire counties in Florida, some of those smaller counties. But it's worked out well, and because their responsiveness to their citizens, whether they have their own police department like Pinecrest or contract with essentially to turn Miami-Dade into their own department, that has worked well as well. So I really don't want to handle anything else about it, although I will, since I might not get it back, I will say that at mentioning 1965 and the academies reminds me that I teach the Cold War, and we teach about a document called NSC 68 that was produced in 1950 that described the challenge of communism. And that document reads so closely to the 9/11 Commission report. It's really amazing. It's got some of the same phrases and so forth. That 1950 NSC 58, though classified, the attitude around it developed a general consensus in the country about the challenge. I thought maybe the 9/11 Commission report would do that, and it doesn't seem to have done it as well, because 10 years after the 9/11 Commission, 10 years after the NSC 68, which was around the beginning of the Korean War, we had not reduced the Army to skeleton size, virtually, you know, shortchanged the Navy. I mean, he's lucky he's a SEAL, because after a while there won't be enough ships in the U.S. Navy. That's an exaggeration, of course, but the U.S. Navy is not what it once was. And the Air Force, we give them about one, if you look on the chart of replacement of fighter planes, we give them about one fighter for every 5 that we would have replaced in the old days. So That too isn't too unusual. I'll just say this: at a Memorial Day speech yesterday, the British and the French consulate were both very gracious. They thanked the United States for coming over in World War I. They thanked the United States for World War II, other efforts. But I did go up to them afterwards and say, thank you, you know, that's the fundamental narrative. But we in the United States are aware that it took us a long time to notice the threat in World War II. It actually took an attack on Pearl Harbor. And then Hitler declared war on us. We didn't even declare war on him. We declared war on the Japanese when they attacked us, and then Hitler 4 days later declared war on us. So we ended up in that war, meaning we were not exactly on the cutting edge of, of recognizing national security threats until they were right on top of us. And it seems to me, in teaching the Cold War, that's what we see a lot of the same issues today. But so much for that. That would give you the impression I give her foreign policy advice, which is not true. When she chaired the committee, you know, when she chaired the committee, we virtually shut down discussion of foreign policy because that was her. We'll discuss it a little bit more now. However, the kids, the grandkids, and our dog Zoe, it dominates most of the conversation.
That's true. That's a good segue that Dexter was talking about the 9/11 Commission that I wanted to touch just a little bit about the threats that we're facing with ISIS. What is America's role in the world? Are we giving up on American exceptionalism? Are we giving up America's role and our military might? They're big questions that really confront us on a day in and day out basis. And I'm on the Intelligence Committee as well, so we get a lot of information about the threats all around us and the threats overseas. So we have ISIS that is taking over, as you have seen, the fall of Ramadi and key Syrian cities. It's a heartbreak that people are now looking at old stones that mean so much, but also 250,000 people who have been killed in Syria, millions displaced. A lot of them have sought refuge in Jordan. We're worried about how that kingdom will maintain itself in the future with all of these refugees that they have taken in. And things are so bad in Syria that some of those refugees are going to find refuge in Iraq, of all places. And you've seen that Iraq is, on a day-by-day basis, is just on the brink of disaster. So there's a lot that's awaiting for us in this session about what is the overall strategy that the United States has in the Middle East and the greater Middle East, to include Syria and Iraq and all of the areas, because we always think about Israel, but when you look at all of the countries there, they are just hanging by a thread, and they could collapse on a moment's notice. So I know that people always say to me, but we don't need boots on the ground, and maybe we can do this and maybe we can do that. But someone has to be there on the ground to make sure that we're hitting the targets and making sure that the supplies get to the people who can take the fight to ISIS. Now, we've left the Kurds standing there just hanging dry when we should have been giving them the military hardware from day one, because these are fighters willing to fight ISIS. Now after all the blood and treasure that we shed in Iraq, and I say this, my stepson and daughter-in-law, Dexter's son from his first marriage, they served in Iraq, and she served in Afghanistan as well as Marine aviators. So we know about the sacrifices of a military family. But after all the blood and treasure in Iraq, now we're faced with a new Iraqi government, which is better than the previous Iraqi government, but they are turning to Iran as the fighters alongside them. Because it's become a Shiite-Sunni kind of conflict, which is what we always wanted to avoid. But the reason that Iran is in the fight against ISIS is as Netanyahu said, it's no longer true that the enemy of my enemy is my friend. No, the enemy of my enemy is still my enemy. So Iran continues to be our enemy, and now they're in cahoots with Iraq in order to defeat ISIL, not to help the people be free. It's to establish the Islamic Caliphate, who's going to be the big dog in that area. Iran wants to establish their caliphate. ISIL wants to establish its caliphate, and that's the only reason that Iran is helping Iraq in deal with ISIL. So I worry about this new world order that is shaping up in the Middle East and alliances that are being made. And I think that our allies are seeing that the U.S. is an unsure partner, and we like Saudi Arabia to take up this fight on its own. We like for Jordan to also get its fighters in the ring as well. So we welcome all of that, but I think that there's some hesitancy from this administration to making sure that those folks will have what they need to continue the fight. If we're not going to be the ones in the fight, then let's help the others to fight that. Because make no mistake, those folks, ISIL, they're not going to stop where they are. It's not a geographic area for them. Iran keeps shouting a death to America, even as we negotiate with this on this nuclear deal. And that's another. I won't talk a long time because I want to take your questions, but I'm very worried about this Iran nuclear deal because we're giving away the store and getting very little out of it. And the Obama administration always has this false dichotomy. Well, you're either for this Iranian deal or you're for war. No, we're for this Iranian deal or we're for a better deal. That's what we've wanted. And if you look at President Obama's own words about centrifuges and whether the underground facility, Fordo, is going to stay, and whether the water reactor plant at Arak, A-R-A-K, is going to stay. Once upon a time, he said, Iraq has to be gone, Fordo has to be gone, centrifuges, forget about it. And now we moved all of those goalposts, and they're allowed up to now, and the deal's not even in writing yet, 6,500 centrifuges. Iran, the supreme leader, has said no military bases can be inspected. Well, if you're Iran, where do you think you're going to put your nuclear facilities? At a military plant, because they say that that's off limits. I mean, you don't have to be the brightest guy in the room to figure out what's going to be happening there. So there are very few guarantees, but I think that I sense a weariness in the American public, that they're just tired of all of this, and they say, well, cut the deal and it's better than nothing. Well, I worry that the deal is so low, the bar is so low, that Iran will be able to fulfill every requirement of the deal. And then we'll say every 6 months, because we're supposed to do a checkup every 6 months, great, Iran has fulfilled it all. But it's like having a high school graduate fulfill kindergarten requirements. Well, of course, he's going to get an A on all of that, but that's not really what we're looking for. So on the international front, and we have so many other terrorist groups to worry about, Boko Haram, the Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, Al-Shabaab, Al-Nusra, I mean, you name it, and it's just a mess of terrorism all over the globe. Making a hard segue into the domestic front, I'm glad when I hear great stories like Cadillacs are selling again. Dexter, you weren't here when they announced. What's that?
You didn't say Cadillac.
Well, I didn't say car sales. Buicks, and are selling. He had 30? 35, but who's counting? Yesterday. And if you take the 4 or 5 days of this weekend, how many? 100? 96. So just like I tell Frank and the realtors, whenever they come up to see me and I say, how's business? These are the indicators. All of you here know more about how the economy is doing than I could ever tell you, because we know it from home sales. We know it from auto sales. You guys know, you're right there in the thick of battle. You know more about this economy and whether we're having a soft recovery, a real recovery, whether it's going to be a long-lasting recovery. And that's what worries me most of all. We have gone through some very difficult years. You know it. I don't need to tell you. You have gone through some difficult years. And I think that we see an uptick. I think that it's things are getting better. But is it a jobless recovery? And I'm just going to end with that. Because if your children are graduating from high school and they're looking for another path, maybe college is not for them, it's not for everybody, is there a good quality job that can keep them here in South Florida? Is South Florida the kind of market where we can have our kids stay here and work here and find the kind of employment that is suitable to them? If your child is graduated just recently from college, you can tell me better than I can tell you if the South Florida is still a positive economic environment for our kids once they graduate from college. So those are really the indicators that tell us. And I think that if you ask, or if you know people in your own family or your neighbors who had lost their jobs and they have not gotten that job back, or they're underemployed rather than employed at the level that they deserve to be. So that's what worries me more than anything, is a jobless recovery where we see indicators, barometers that are telling you, yeah, the patient is no longer with a fever, but are they really able to walk around and function? And that's what worries me most about this recovery. So I hope that your businesses are doing well, and I'd love to get your questions on anything.
30 years ago, I moved here, and one of the most impressive things I saw, coming from Homestead Air Force Base, went out on a boat with some of the pararescue guys there. I used to train there, and I saw Stiltsville. And unfortunately, Andrew destroyed almost all of it. And I just want to thank you, because I know you are the one that saved it and went up to the federal level and saved what was remaining. And I just hope, if there's anything that we need to do as a local government and community, if that ever happens, or if we ever get another Andrew that partially wipes out the rest of them, I want to see them rebuilt, because that's a treasure that my kids, I want their kids to see in 60 years. It's the most beautiful thing you can see in their waters. They're not destroying whales and turtles out there, these still homes. And so,
well, thank you so much. Boy, Dexter and I spent many an hour working on saving Stiltsville. And it's interesting that the very organizations that love to put Stiltsville, the picturesque photos in their albums, when they talk about Florida and South Florida, they'd put a picture of Stiltsville, were the ones that were doing everything in their power to making sure that those homes would come down. So we kept them up there, and as you know, they're run by a trust and semi-public private partnership, and they're still hoping that the next hurricane will wipe them out. We're going to keep on fighting for them, and we're going to make sure that that little jewel remains for many generations to come to enjoy. And as you know, the Scouts send their kids over there all the time, and it's a very safe, good environment. It's a family-oriented environment. So we want to keep Stiltsville as the beautiful place that it is. And this weekend, lamentably not related to Stiltsville, but around that area, there was a young lady who lost her life. But, you know, that had nothing to do with Stiltsville. They just happened to be cruising around there. And if it wasn't going to be there, it would be, you know, in Elliott Key or somewhere else. So, but we don't want anything like that to be used as a reason to close a beautiful jewel of Miami-Dade County.
Two questions. On the international side, not on the foreign side. It takes money to fight a war. Somebody's funding ISIS. Isn't that whoever is funding ISIS our enemy? That's question one. Question two, on the domestic side. It seems like just lost the word. entitlement programs seem to be spinning out of control. That seems to be a huge drain on our economy. Does Congress understand that those entitlement programs really do draw out of the economy as a put back in?
Excellent question. First of all, on the ISIS funding, you know, people think of ISIS as this ragtag, you know, rebel group here and there. It is the best funded terrorist group in the world. First, they went into Iraq. They raided the banks. They've taken money out of every corner of that area, and so they're well funded. Then you have places like countries like Qatar. You know, Qatar is our ally in quotes. At the same time, Qatar has been cutting its own deals with a lot of other folks that are unsavory at best. Qatar is the home of Al Jazeera. Qatar is the place where people find refuge and sanctuary. So we're working hard to making sure that Qatar makes the decision that you're with us or you're going to be against us. You can't play both sides. And then you have other countries that as well look at the United States as not a sure bet. They're thinking, you know, the United States is going to get war weary. They're going to pull out. People are tired. But these terrorists are here to stay. And it's a hurtful thing to say, but it's the truth. Those terrorists are going to stay. And a lot of these communities and a lot of these tribes, a lot of these groups and ethnic groups and religious groups, they're looking at what is in their favor. What is their future? Is it going to be with the Americans or with the coalition that is here today and gone tomorrow, or is it really with the terrorists who are right in the neighborhood? So that's why we're losing out, and we don't put enough pressure on our allies to make those decisions, to say if they're with us, and don't hedge their bets. They've got to be in it with us through the end, 100% of the time, and we have uncertain allies at best. So we have good folks like the United Arab Emirates. They understand that even though Iran says death to America, death to Israel, when you go to the UAE, they will tell you, we think we're the ones that are going to get hit first because they're the infidels. You know, you can't have any liquor here or there. You can't do this and that, fraternize with women. But in the UAE, there's a more Western kind of feel. So they worry that all of these terror groups are going to really come after them before they go after other targets like Israel. So I'm worried about all these groups, where they get their funding, and they are a very well-funded organization, very well-funded. On the entitlement programs, you know this better than I do. That is really the driving force for when you look at the budget. People tend to think, well, we look at whatever, you know, $900 hammer, and people think, well, if we just eliminate the waste and DOD, the waste, fraud, and abuse, then that would really bring a lot of the costs down. But a lot of the costs are related to the services that you or your loved ones or your parents or somebody in your own family depends on, whether that's you know, Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security, and it's those kinds of entitlement programs that is really the lion's share of the budget, and that's why it's very difficult for us to make the kind of cuts that really result in long-term savings, because you know, we'll have to be making those tough decisions that nobody wants to make. Do we raise the retirement age? Do we look at these programs and say, you know, too many people are eligible. We don't have enough money for that big of a pool. It's very tough. Nobody wants to be in that position to say up to here and no more, because we're talking about your parents and your relatives who depend on these social programs. So it's very tough. The economic environment is not the best. It's not the prettiest. and we're up there to make some tough choices and make some hard votes. And we live in an era of gotcha politicking, where you cast a hard vote because you know you have to do it, and then people say, oh, you see that? She's for slashing Social Security so that you don't get your hard-earned money back, and you see that? She's to make sure that you don't get your the poor people don't get their Medicaid services, and that your parents don't get the Medicare services. So it's really tough, and we cast a lot of votes every week. And I've been around so long that I've got an incredible record that people could slam me on, but you just got to tell them the truth. There isn't enough money to fund all of the wonderful programs that we'd love to fund. Nobody wants to be taxed more, and at the same time they want their benefits. So it's a terrible situation. You asked the key question: how can we ever produce a balanced budget? How can we make sure that people look upon us as careful stewards of their taxpayer dollars? And they don't want you to be up there spending money that we don't have. And look at the deficit, look at the debt, it's out of control. And at the same time, people say, yeah, but don't cut this and don't cut that. It's a tough position to be in.
I understand what you just said, but there's also, we're still at the federal level living under the sequester. Which the numbers, everyone, when that was passed, said this is ridiculous. We cannot survive on a sequester budget. Why doesn't the Republican majority in both houses do away with the sequester and get back to the real world as far as what it takes to run a government?
That's a great question. I do not think that there are the votes needed to get rid of the sequester. We have folks who are very, very conservative in our party, and Democrats also, who are some of them who are very conservative, and they say you get rid of the sequester, we'll never make the cuts that we need to make. So I realize that what you're saying, but I'm like roadkill. I'm on the middle of the road. It's not a pretty picture. Most of the folks, they say they don't want extremists, but they really are hoping that they get somebody on either end. But sequester, yes. Look, when we did not approve the budget in D.C., I don't know, was it Christmas or Thanksgiving, and some of the parks had to be shut, you would think that the world had come to an end. And people were livid about that. And you had veterans coming to the parks, World War II parks, and they had these barricades, which is ridiculous, because most of the monuments and parks in D.C. are open air. There was it cost more money to put the barricades up than, it was just horrible. But they wanted to show that the Republicans want to eliminate services for folks. And so they're trying to say, look, this sequester is responsible for homeless people living out in the streets in record number, et cetera. And it's really a way of Congress to admit we have a spending problem. Stop me before I spend again. I can't trust myself. So you got to put this, straight jacket on me called the sequester, so that I don't keep spending money that we don't have. So it's almost us admitting that we have a spending addiction. Somebody's got to stop us from spending, and we're going to stop ourselves by this sequester. But it impacts the military, which is my biggest worry. The military want to make sure that we fund our men and women in uniform, because they keep us safe, and it has a disproportionate impact, negative impact on the military than it does in any other branch of government, and that's very worrisome to me. And they come and they tell us every time when they appear before us, you got to get rid of the sequester. I don't think it's going to happen.
I hate to end it, but if you want to talk, you can talk to her at dinner later.
Listen, Grant and Michael, thank you so much. I love coming here. I am so thankful.
Yes, we're going to lose weight together.
Come on, Dexter, come on over here.